Hello, this is a recording of the cute little goose called Gertie. Okay, so I have base coated the background, and I've done one dark blue. It's not actually Prussian blue, although I think I probably said I was going to use Prussian blue. And I've done one in a pale blue, which is a little bit grubby, so I'm going to do something else with that. It's a little bit grubby up here. Okay, so I've also base coated Gertie Goose with as many coats of buttermilk as it takes to achieve good coverage. You want it to be really opaque. So before I work on anything else there, I am going to base coat in the hat, and that's also going to be in buttermilk, just as an undercoat to red, but you could use any colour you like for undercoating. Sometimes I use grey. And get the little hat done. The brush was a little bit wet, so that's diluted it a little bit. Zoom in a little bit as well, so that should help. And I might as well get the other one done and paint them both at the same time. So this is on the bird, and it is the same colour as the bird I've base coated with the light buttermilk. Or another good one to use is bleached sand, actually. So while that hat's drying, I'm going to float some. I've undercoated the Wellington boots as well, I should say. I'm going to float some either milk chocolate or raw sienna, whatever you have to hand. I'm not really strict about colours. And using a flat or an angle brush, whichever you prefer, I'm just going to side load in a little bit of the milk chocolate, and I'm going to float kind of in from the edge, not right down to the bottom edge yet. I'm going to sneak up to the edge when I've got some of that done. Have my mop brush handy, a little mop, and just soften. I usually soften on the water side, not the paint side. And I'm also going to float a little bit under the hat. Just gives the goose a little bit of colour there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. I might go a little bit down the front as well. I don't want it to just be at the bottom. I want it to be a fairly sort of warm looking goose. Okay, and the other one, and float under the hat. Actually, I should float the other side of where the fur is going to be. So floating down the front. That's better because I actually just floated with what was on my brush. If you reload your brush, start away from the edge so that you can kind of sneak up to it, and it stops you from getting a narrow float that looks like an outline as well. Just checking that hat to see if it's dry. It's not quite dry, so that's okay. While that's drying, I will take a liner brush and paint the beak in the milk chocolate. So whenever I'm using a liner brush and I'm doing some sort of close detail work, I will hold the brush. This is, I've zoomed in so it might look much bigger than it is, but I will hold the brush very near the bristles so that I can control the very tip of the brush more easily. If I'm doing loose work, I hold it far back on the handle, but for tiny fine work, I hold it right down there. So again, I'm going to do the other bird, and this will give you a chance to see if you like the goose on a light background. So you can choose, you can do either colour background, whatever you want. You can also transpose the tracing so that you trace the bird so it's looking the other way. And I should have done that really today, but I didn't think of it until too late. So while that's drying, I'm going to give that hat another little bit of a chance to dry. I'm taking some of the red. I put tiny amounts of paint out on my palette. I never put too much out because it just ends up being wasted. And I don't forget the tough time we had getting paint when we had the pandemic. And now, of course, it's so expensive. So anyway, I'm base coating in the hat. Just carefully. Again, I'm holding it fairly near the bristles because I'm doing quite close work, but it is actually a little round brush that I've got here. It's about that's a number 1 actually. And down the length of the Santa hat. So either side of the fur. And actually, while I've got this red on my brush, I might as well do the little boots as well. And I'm going to swap to a liner brush for this actually because it's so tiny. This bird has got skates on. That's, you know, optional. So I'll swap back to my liner brush so I can just do that a little bit more carefully. Kind of outline them and fill them in. Go around the back of the legs as well. Try not to go over the legs. And the other one. This one is actually closer to me. The leg is closer to me, so it can be a little bit bigger. Tiny bit bigger. I think it's a little bit too big. So I'm going to make the other one a little bit bigger. It's easier to do that than to try and make it smaller and have to fiddle with the background colour and all sorts. So there we are. And we'll put some bit of fluff around the top of the boot later on. Okay, so I'm going to do the other one. I'll just pause it there for a moment so you're not watching loads of base coating the same thing. Okay, so I have base coated the hat and the boots and in the red. And now I'm going to add a little bit of snow around both their feet. So I kind of like to use a little stiff filbert for that without very much paint. It's almost dry brushing, but just slightly damper than dry brushing. So I'm loading up a little stiff filbert with white and a little kitchen roll to wipe some of it off. And around the feet, I'm adding some snow. You can do this before if you want to. And if you're worried about going over your boots or anything, you can put the snow on first. I sometimes put some little snowballs in, but I'm not going to do that yet because I don't want to have dots of wet paint lying around that I might smudge. So I can leave that to the end. A little bit stronger. That's just a hint of some snow. And I'll do some around this one. You won't see this so much on the lighter background, so I can go quite a bit more paint and a little bit stronger with it, a little bit heavier. And just a little suggestion of some snow around the feet. And this one definitely I will have some snowballs on. Might be a bit difficult. This one's got the ice skates on, that's optional. You can put them on both if you want to. And keep that fairly simple, as in drawing them. So I've got them both. Both have the snow on now around. Okay, so I suppose we ought to put the eye on next. So you can use soft black or lamp black. I haven't got soft black handy, so I'm just going to use a little bit of milk chocolate and black together, which doesn't make it so dark. So a little bit, tiny little bit of a dot here, and I don't use the stylus, I use the tip of my brush and holding it again very near the bristles to do it, and I'd rather make it smaller. I can always go a little bit bigger if I need to, but that's fine. And again here. I don't want to make it too tiny because I would like to come back and add a little tiny highlight on there when that's dry, but not until it's dry. I'm going to add some tail sort of feathers, which are going to be little comma strokes. So I've got, this is better, small brushes in better condition. So I'm going to do that carefully and starting like daisy petals, starting from the tip coming in, different lengths. Oh, that was a bit of a fat one. I'll go over it. And a few on the wing where the wing would be. So again, you can put a little line, you can put a little mark where your wing's going to be if you want, so that you can, didn't really show up very well, but never mind. If you just want to put some little indication of where your feathers are going to be on your wings, and probably do that again a little bit stronger with a liner brush. Let that dry. So do that on the other bird. Tail feathers and a little wing. Okay. So now I'm going to begin to work on the hat and the boots. So I'm going to go to my red colour, whichever red you've got. It doesn't have to be what I'm using, but this is natural red light actually. And I'm taking a little bit of orange on there. I'll sometimes use orange to highlight red. I'll sometimes use electric pink. That's lovely as well. So I've just streaked a little bit of orange onto the hat. A lot of the hat's going to be covered up with a fur. Whoops, went to the wrong colour. A lot of the hat is going to be covered up with a fur that's going to come over it, but it's good to get it on there and done nicely. Bring up a little bit more orange. And also on the boots a little bit, not too much paint on the brush. Just kind of tickle a little bit on. Both of those boots. And we'll get the skate blades on, I think, next. Okay. I did actually shade under the wing and also where the leg meets the body, but I've made that wet now, so I'm going to do it on the other one. So going back to the milk chocolate, just where the leg meets the body underneath. And that one kind of goes more on the bird, so I'm going to shade behind it a little bit. That's just a float. And I'm just taking a bit more water on the brush to float on the wing. Don't want it dripping with water. Try not to let it look outlined. And come around. Okay, just checking. Yep, I'm happy with that, except for that wonky leg, but I can put that leg back in again. And on this one, I'm going to shade at the top of the leg. So I like to put where I want to float on my left side because I'm right-handed, and I like to float next to, put my colour, my milk chocolate next to where I want to float. And again, around the wing a little bit. I just picked up some red there. So while it's still wet, I'll just clean my flat brush and use a flat brush, damp with water, just to clean up. That's the easiest way. I do find a lot of the time people, if they make a mistake or something like that happens, they will want to wipe it off with kitchen roll or wet wipe or something like that. And all that does is just starts to spread it around and makes it even worse, an even worse mess. So the easiest way is to just take a flat brush or angle or anything, flood it with water usually if it's if it's a good blob of paint, and stop it from drying out, and then clean it. Wipe the brush and clean and wash the brush and keep doing that until you get rid of it. Okay. I haven't put this in the instructions, but I want my hat to be a little bit brighter. So I've put a tiny bit of torrid orange out on my palette, and I'm going to streak some of that onto the hat as well. It does tend to be quite transparent, but so you don't need to be too mean with it, but it does really brighten up red a lot. Okay, do the other hat. I never thought I'd use these neon colours, but they are really nice when you're highlighting. Right, back to the liner brush. I use this I got from Peggy Harris. It's a silver mini script. The code is 24, oh gosh, covered in paint. 24077S actually, 2407S. I've had this one for quite a few years. I'm trying to keep it nice because it's not so easy to get replacements. Right, so this one I'm going to put the blades on the boots, so that's coming there. Oops, I went wrong there. It went off pieced. So I'm just going to take some water on the brush. What I was saying just now, just clean it up with a clean flat brush before it has a chance to dry. That's too wet now. Okay, so I'm just going to do that again, wipe it off, and I'll give it a dry before I do any more. Okay, that's dry, so I'm going to go back and finish off that blade. Hold the brush again near the bristles as it's fine work. And the things that attach them, I don't know what they're called, things that attach them to the actual boot. Okay, she's ready to go off skating. Just before she goes off skating, I'm going to put another little bit of orange on the boot. I don't think I did it. If I did, it's kind of vanished. Yeah, that's better. A little bit of orange on the front of the boots. Okay, happy with that. Washing the brush. I've got another little job to do, which is to put the dot, the white highlight dot in the eye. And if you make your dot too big, it's not the end of the world. I have actually managed to make a tiny weeny little dot so it doesn't look scary. But if I did make it look scary by doing a great big highlight in there, the easiest thing to do is just nibble away at it with a bit of your black or whatever color you used, and nibble away a little bit of the white with a liner brush. I find that's the easiest thing to do anyway. Okay, so I'm going to start on the pom-pom and the fluff around the hat trim. Okay, so I'm going to take the liner brush again and load it. Whenever I'm loading a liner brush, I always try and imagine that I've got 10 edges to this brush, and I don't twist it in the paint, I just turn it and load each of those 10 sides. And I'm going to start doing the pom-pom first, doesn't matter where you start. I'm going in grey. I'll come back and put white on top when I'm done. And with the fur trim coming out and up over the hat itself as well. I know we painted the hat red around it, but it doesn't matter at all. This should overpower the red quite easily. Try not to cover up my little eye, especially as I did a nice tiny highlight. And also, let's do the boots. So coming from that kind of top edge of the boot, just a little bit around the back, a few dots are sufficient. Make sure you don't have wonky legs. Okay. I'm not so used to painting on my own and talking to myself because I've been having people coming back into the house again, which has been lovely. And I feel as though there's lots of long silences, but I could talk about the weather. It's lovely and sunny now, by the way. It was pouring this morning. Mild. So it's about 65, I think. Or about 20 degrees. Okay, so there's the trim around the hat. You have to stop before it's in danger of growing too much. And I'll leave those to dry while I do some little strokes to kind of enhance the feathers a little bit on the tail and the wing. So I've got my liner brush, but this time I haven't got wet paint. It's loaded into the white. Again, I've got 10 sides. So the brush is looking fairly thick at the moment. And I can do some extra strokes right on top, a little bit stronger. And especially if you've shaded behind, like I have. then it's good to have some of these little feathers on top. Okay, she's looking cute. It's funny how it all comes together, and you think at first, oh, it's horrible, you've got that ugly stage, and when you start adding these little touches, it starts to look really good. Well, I think so anyway. Okay, so I'm now going to, I think my grey is dry. I'm going to start adding the fur trim. I can't remember which one I did first. I think it's this one. This one looks fairly dry. So again, prepare the liner brush very well. Stroke the bristles, the length of the bristles through the imaginary 10 sides. Make sure you haven't got a drop of water that's going to roll down the brush and flood what you've just painted. And that's really annoying. So I'm actually going to test it first. I usually test it on the back of my hand. See if I can get it working really finely. It might look a little bit thicker as I've zoomed in. And I'm not going to cover up all of the grey, but most of it. And I like to do the fur in different directions. So I can still see some of the grey showing through. I will probably come back and do that again anyway. I've loaded up the brush, so I'm just testing it before I put it on my surface. And adding some of the fur trim around the little ankle boots. I had enough paint on my brush to continue without reloading. And the pom-pom. And I'd like to pull my strokes towards me. So a little project like this, you can turn it around. So the other goose should be dry now. Again, coming towards myself. Lots and lots of strokes. And I like to add glitter to my fur trims as well. I know some people like to put glitter absolutely everywhere. I kind of like to put it in some places and not others. I think it looks more effective like that. But it's your bird, you can do what you like. I've just realised I haven't done these boots. Okay. Just carry on with what I've got at the moment and get this pom-pom done. I think I prefer the darker background. We'll see what it's like when it's finished, but at the moment I'm more in favour of the darker background. I haven't gone as dark. I actually didn't use the very dark one. I used Wedgwood blue on this occasion. I've got a little bit of something there that's been there for a while. I'm going to try and think of something to do with that. Let's get the fur trim on the boots done while I'm thinking. And that grey seems to cover quite well. I am going to do some stamping with snowflakes, so that's probably going to become a snowflake. The brush. And I'm leaving those boots to dry for a minute, and I'll go back to my other bird and do more pure white just on the fur trims. Make sure I've got it working nice and finely. quite fine balance to make sure you've got enough paint in the brush that you're going to get good opaque coverage, but not too much that you can't get nice fine strokes. Usually when I've just loaded my brush, I don't put it at the very edge. I put it in a little bit from the edge so that I can see what it's going to be like in the area that's not quite so important. I want it to really look spiky over the edge. Am I happy with that? I think I am. And they usually say with doing fur or anything really is always paint from root to tip. So from root towards tip rather than tip to root. But I do break that rule sometimes when I know my brush is working really, really finely and I'm confident about what's going to happen. Because when you land the brush down first off, that's when you have the most amount of paint, and that's when you can deposit more than you want to sometimes. So trim is growing a little bit, but I don't mind that actually at the back. Okay, yes, I'm happy with her. Now I mentioned before that this one's a little bit of a grubby one around here. So I'm going to float a bit of Wedgwood blue on there, I think. I really like Wedgwood blue at the moment. I don't know why, but just hope it's not one of those ones that's discontinued. I'm going to grab my favourite mop, which actually doesn't shed any hair, even when it's new. It's Royal Langnickel, and it's called a Moderna, and it's fabulous because it just doesn't shed any hairs at all. So I use that one a lot. It's my favourite one. So that one's ready, and I'm going to get a large flat. And I'm going to dampen. I hope this goes okay because I haven't done this in practice. I'm just going to dampen that area there, maybe around here, everywhere. And I'm going to take, that's only with water, I've only dampened it with water. I'm going to take some of the Wedgwood blue on my brush, sheer as I can possibly get it. And have my mop brush ready. That's a little bit on the wet side, but we'll see how it goes. And just mop it gently. Fairly happy with that. Not ecstatic, but fairly happy. Not too wet. And a little bit stronger, just a little bit. You can always add, but it's harder to take away. Now, the way that I look after my mop brush is, as I use it, I have a piece of kitchen roll handy, and I grip it near to the tips of the bristles. Sorry, I'm just going to make sure I'm on camera. So I grip it right here and then rub it the very tips onto the tissue. If you have got a little bit of a damp patch on there, that's absolutely fine. And I do that when I'm painting because then it's ready for me to use next time. And I know that I've dealt with it and nothing else is going to happen. With this one, I'm going to add a little bit of foliage around her neck. So I've just put a couple of greens out of my palette, and I'm going to take a little deerfoot I've got this nasty one here, really. I say nasty, it's kind of splayed out quite a lot. It's an old one, but it does make nice foliage. So I'm loading up in the dark colour first. Take a little bit off. I'd rather underdo it than overdo it. So it's not dry, I haven't dried it, I've just taken some paint off the tips. And I'm very, very lightly going to add some foliage around her neck. So she's going to have a little Christmas wreath. Won't show up terribly well at the moment till I put the lighter green on. And I'm using, it's a new Deco Art colour, well, newish anyway. It's Matcha Green, which was brought out to replace the lovely olive green, which upset me at the time. But I have got a couple of bottles, so I'm okay. But this is the matcha. So very lightly sprinkle that on top. Barely touching the surface, no pressure. Keeping it very light and airy. Yeah. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And I will use a stylus, a tiny stylus, with a very pointy end actually, to do some tiny little berries on there. And I usually do groups of 3. Not too symmetrical. I'm doing a few odd ones as well. And perhaps some white ones, I think. One here and there. Okay. Just leave that to dry for a minute. And I'm going to look back to this one where I've done the floating around it, the shading. I always find that if there's a huge contrast between the colour your base colour and the colour you're floating with, it's harder to get it looking good. I'm just going to put a little bit more white snow on around here. Won't even matter if I go over the ice skates a little bit. Right. And I'll just go and finish off those boots with a fur trim. Okay, just reloading the brush. And usually when I'm teaching, I say to always know what your brush is going to do before you put it down. And I must admit I didn't when I started with this one. I didn't test it. Okay. Nearly done. Okay, so now I'm going to do some foliage. I'm going to do a, I don't know what you call it, bow, I suppose, really. So I'm using a little bit of mixture of the dark green that I've got, which was, I think that's Hauser dark green, and a little bit of the matcha green. Or you could just use avocado. And I'm going to come out and do main branch. And then lots and lots of liner brush pine. Oops, got a little bit of water on the brush there, just spotted it. Don't want that. So do lots and lots of strokes, overlap them. Don't do them all in a straight line, cross them over. And you get more of an attractive look. Oops, that was a bit thick. And disguise it. A little bit more water on the brush. Usually if your paint's coming out too thick, you haven't got enough water on it. Turn it from whichever direction is easier for you to see. Okay. Just reloading the brush before I add some more here, and just ignore what's there to go over what's there. And you get more of a natural look. I'm going to go over this with some of the matcha green as well, so it will lighten up quite a bit. And then whilst this is drying, I can set it to one side. Just deliberately trying to cross some over so it doesn't look too uniform. Okay. Still a little bit wet, but I'll try and see if I go with the matcha green. So loading the brush, the 10 sides of the brush again, and adding some lighter lines. But needles, that's the word I'm looking for, needles. If you find your green is too bright, then just pick up a bit of the dark green with it. Okay, I'm just going to pause it while I get the other duck done. So I've done both the geese foliage, and I'm just base coated the berries in. I used actually bleached sand because I find it's really good coverage wise. So I've done 3 berries on each, and I've dried them before adding the red. I want to add a little bit of snow to the needle branches. I'm doing out a little bit of fresh white, which I'll need anyway when I come to do the stamping. I might give those berries, those red berries, another coat. But while they're drying a bit, I've just taken a fairly hefty amount of paint on my liner brush, so it's not looking its skinniest. And I'll just do a little bit of a blobbing on. What else to describe it as, and just let some of the paint sort of blob down to create like snow or icicles or something like that. Okay. Again on the other one. So just kind of blob it along a little bit. Let some of it kind of creep down a little way. Okay, so that's my snow on there. I'll dry that. I've taken my flat brush and floated some dark red. I've used alizarin on the bottom of each of the berries there. So I've turned my work to my left and working from my left to my right as I'm right-handed. Floating, it's not really so much a float, it's quite a hefty amount of paint because there isn't a great deal of difference in the values. The reds are quite, you can see them on my palette even. They're not that far apart, but one is definitely darker, but it will work. Try not just use the edge of the brush, otherwise you end up outlining. Okay. So I'm just washing the brush, and on the other side, this one's already dry. I'm going to float some of that torrid orange, or any bright orange that you've got, or electric pink. Just making sure my snow's dry. It is. I sometimes use coral blush as well. My highlights, some red, I do like that very much as well. Just while I'm there, just add a little bit more onto my hat. And I'm quite happy with those berries. I'll dry the other one quickly and do that one too. Okay, so I've just put that highlight on the other berries, and when they're dry, you can come back and do a little comma stroke type thing highlight. So I'm just going to do that over to one side. And it's like a tiny comma stroke. This might be a bit wet still. That's okay. I kind of curved it a little bit so that it follows the shape of the berry. I'm going to add a few little green berry dots, matcha green, to the pine needles. Not all in a row, kind of do them randomly. You may not look it, but I do take quite a lot of care over doing dots as I'm placing them. I'm not just going to dump them anywhere. So think about where you place your dots. Okay, that's good enough for now. And get on with some stamping. So I've got a foam pad, not the best one actually. Hold on. I couldn't find a better one, so this one will have to do. But you can see that it's kind of, this is a foam pad. It's something to do with card making. I forget what it's called. And I'm going to put a very thin layer of white onto the pad. I might actually use the back there. I think that might be better. It's a bit flatter. So it's a good idea to test when you're, before you commit yourself to doing some stamping. It's a good idea to test on a cut piece of card or something that you don't mind if it gets messed up, so that you can decide how it looks and whether it's what you want. So I've got a bit of card here. I should have had this ready for you. Actually, that side's not working. It's sinking in. I'm going to have to go for my lumpy side. Just hope for the best. The big mistake that people make is by pushing into the paint. You only need to lightly tap it until you see some of the paint appearing on your image, and then you can touch down, push down hard when you go to stamp, and lift straight up without smearing. That's my favorite little stamp, which a lot of you who've painted with me before will have seen, and it's in the instructions somewhere as well, which the code is. It's Lavinia stamp, mini stamp. And what I like to do is I like to enhance, do a few more just dots around the stamps, and you can extend them. You can add bits on the tips to make them look different. All sorts of things, just with dots. That's why I like dots so much. So I'm quite happy with that, even though my surface here is a bit lumpy, it's still working. So I put out fresh paint, thin layer of white, tap, 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 touch down hard. I'm going to put one there where I had the blob. Touch down hard, lift straight up without smearing. There's my first one. And over here, and I turn this stamp around as well, so it's not looking quite so uniform. So one up there. Okay, so I'm going with my stylus. It's a good idea to clean your stamp straight away, because if paint dries in it, it distorts the image of the stamp. So I've got a little soft toothbrush that I keep in my water basin, and I lightly scrub it so that it's clean and ready to use the next time. It took me a long time to find that stamp, so I take care of it. And I was going to do some dotting just to enhance a little bit. I'll do some white dots on the around the foliage. And make this one a little bit more intricate. So I'm doing some little dots. It's just to show you that you can change, even though you've got stamp and it looks a certain way, you can change it. Don't be afraid to do that. It's good to experiment and play. I might have a bit of a center, and I sometimes attach diamonds to these. You know, in there where there's a big circle, I might put a little diamond in there so that it sparkles. And very often, while my dots are still wet, I will add a bit of powder glitter maybe, or you can use any glitter you like. Just adding a little bit more to that pom-pom. And that's really where she is. The only thing I did do, which was off camera, I think, on this pale blue one, I added, because it wasn't really showing, the white wasn't really showing up as well as I wanted it to. I just smeared a little bit around her feet and everything. I will put some snowballs there as well. Just looking for a bigger stylus. So this is slightly bigger. This is why I didn't want to do this earlier, because they're dots and they would smear unless you were going to dry it in between. And I'm quite happy with her, so I'm going to put her to one side. I will finish this one off with the bits and pieces that I've done here. In fact, I'll do it on camera. So I've got another snowflake stamp here, which I quite like. It's from a company in England, and I can't think what it's called. Inkylicious it's called. That's quite a nice stamp as well. So again, it's tap, tap, tap. Press down hard, don't smear, and stand straight up. I think I will actually just do some of this one as well on here. So you'll notice that I haven't put any snowballs on yet, because I don't want to smear them. Okay, so I'm going to clean both stamps. A soft toothbrush. Baby's toothbrush is a good one. If you can get them, we have them sometimes in the pound shop. Okay, so now I'm going to add some snowballs around her feet. This is another one that's good to extend with extra dots. And you can glitter to your heart's content. Oh, one other thing I will just show you. It's called actually glossy accents, which I sometimes put on top of berries to make them glossy. Well, the actual berries will give you a gloss shine. But what you need to do is put it on and leave it to settle, because it will kind of spread a little bit. And when I'm using this, it's very easy to clog up the nib. You can get these at various craft fairs or Hobbycraft. Glossy accents made by Ranger, I think. Yeah. So I'm just going to very gently, I'll tilt it on its side, almost without really squeezing it much, just very, very gently get a little bit on the tip. And then without touching my berry, I'm just going to work it out a little bit to the edge of the berry. The last thing you want is each of these berries to go into one. So less is more. You probably won't be able to see it on camera very easily, but it does really give it a nice glossy shine. I put them both together, you might be able to see. I don't want to tilt it because I don't want the medium to kind of merge into each other. One other thing I do before I put the lid on, tap it so that the medium goes back into the bottle and you keep your nib clear. And I haven't used that for about a year, so it obviously works. Okay, so you can see there's a little bit of a difference, just being careful. You can see how shiny the berries are there. Okay, so that's the end of the demonstration. But you will, if you want to ask me any questions, I'm willing to answer if you email me or something. And I hope you enjoyed painting her as much as I do. I quite like the pale blue one now that I've gone further along with it. I don't know which one I like best. Anyway, you can decide. I look forward to seeing ones that you do. So thank you again for watching, and good luck with your Gerties. Bye-bye.